We'll start in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, where the Georgia Bulldogs fell behind 28-0 before we could even blink. They had no clue how to stop the Alabama offense. It was just Jalen Milroe left, running back right around the end, and nothing they could do to stop that Alabama offense in the first half. And they had no answers on their offensive side of the ball as well. Then everything changed after halftime. Alabama got a little bit too conservative. Georgia took advantage, made some big stops, marched down the field a couple times, and they were right there with a chance to win the game. But Ryan Williams gets the big touchdown reception to put them ahead, and then they get the interception with under a minute to go. What a game. Yeah, I'll just throw it to you. I had to scrap all my notes from this game. I have very little. I just thought it'd be fun to react to an awesome college football game. I'll just throw it over to you, Garrett.
Yeah, man. I mean, what a game is the way to lead that off. Obviously, two great teams. We expected a really good game coming into this. And man, what a disastrous start for the Georgia Bulldogs. Had us tweeting about, having a running clock in the second half because we thought it would be no point. There's no way Georgia comes back from this. First off, you got to go hats off to Alabama, right? Alabama plays a fantastic game. Jalen Milroe, really, really solid throughout this game, has 374 yards through the air, 117 on the ground, accounted for 4 total touchdowns. So just a fantastic job from him. And you got to also look at the kid, Ryan Williams, 6 catches, 177 yards, the 75-yarder obviously being the highlight of that whole thing. But man, like looking at both of these teams, I was really, really impressed with Georgia and their ability to come back on this. I didn't think that Georgia was going to have it in them, but to be on the road, you don't have your home field advantage, you don't have your home crowd, and to just keep grinding, keep pushing, keep doing everything you can to try to get back into this game. Got to give Carson Beck some credit. Did not start this game very well. Had a very, very bad start to this game. Ends the day with 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, but 439 yards passing, kept the team moving, kept the ball moving down the field in a night where they really couldn't run the football, which is maybe where we need to start with Georgia. Is they probably won't have the season they want to have if they cannot establish a little bit more of a run game. Trevor Etienne goes 12 carries for 55 yards, and after that, you didn't have a 10-yard rusher. And so this is a place where Georgia probably has to address a little bit better of a run game, and you might have been able to win this ball game. There might have been some moments or some opportunities there for you to not let this game get as out of hand if you're able to do that. But once again, we're not going to just sit there and say that Alabama was the worst team or that they didn't deserve it or Georgia just blew it. Alabama played their tails off. Alabama came out there, smacked them in the face to start. Georgia had no idea what was happening to them. And they look up and it's 28-0. And no matter how good of a team you are, coming back from 28 points down is really hard to do. The fact that they took a lead is almost miraculous. But yeah, when you're looking to, cover up a 28-point lead, you don't need to score that many points down the stretch. And Alabama didn't need that much good play down the stretch to end up pulling off this victory, and they did.
They needed one big play, right? They needed one more big play, and they got it from Ryan Williams, like I mentioned. That long touchdown reception where he hit a couple of spin moves. It was 75 yards. That's right. It was the first play right after Carson Beck hit a 67-yard pass to take the 1-point lead. And then Jalen Milroe hits Ryan Williams for 75 yards. He hits a couple spin moves on his way to the end zone. Just an insane effort from nuts. But he's 17 years old. I don't know if you guys were aware, but
which is an absurd stat, but it's getting a little overplayed. I
absolutely.
He was 17, and this other guy, he was in 3rd grade when he was there, and I get it. That's fun. It's fun, but at the same time, come on.
You mentioned the start of this game, and I think that's the story. I know the comeback is massive. The comeback is really fun. And they almost pulled it off, which is just absolutely incredible. But the start of this game really set Georgia back, and that's putting it lightly. When they were on defense, Alabama wasn't changing much up from drive to drive. They were trying to hit the outside, and they were just beating Georgia to the corner, turning up field and running for a bunch of yards. And then when Milroe was wanting to pass it, Kirby Smart mentioned they're doing a lot of empty looks for the pass concept, something that Alabama hadn't shown a bunch of this year. But just nothing that Georgia could do on the defensive side of the ball was stopping anything Alabama wanted to do. And then on the flip side, I thought it was really interesting that from the word go, Georgia wanted to push the ball downfield. It was almost like Kirby Smart and Carson Beck and Bobo, the offensive coordinator, had some vendetta on people that were questioning Carson Beck's ability to pass, and they wanted to come out and say, we'll show you. We'll do it against Alabama. They're pushing it down the field immediately. They almost hit a couple of big plays early that could have changed the course of this early going in this game, but they couldn't connect on some big passes. They couldn't get the run established. And they were just behind the 8 ball. And no matter how talented you are, even if you're Georgia, going down 28-0 is not a recipe for success, especially on the road. But man, Alabama, you got to be impressed with getting the big win at home. I know a lot of people expected them to win this game. They delivered in front of the home crowd. They showed Kalen DeBoer, completely showing that his program is not going to take a step back. It did give me a little bit of shades of the Sugar Bowl last year, where he was up big against Texas late, and Texas had a shot to tie or take the lead late in the game. But Kalen DeBoer, 30-3 now as a power conference head coach. That man is going to do big things at Alabama. The program is not going to take a step back. And I think for Georgia fans, you can walk away much more confident, much more holding your head high and looking forward to the rest of the season than you were at halftime, because, man, you had to be dreading what the rest of the season looked like at halftime, dreading a trip to Austin, dreading a trip to Oxford, and maybe even thinking you might not make the college football playoff at halftime. And now you got to see what your team can be in the second half. So I think both teams can walk away pretty happy with how this second half played out. Obviously, Alabama's happy to get the win, right, but Georgia can carry some good lessons going forward and hopefully tweak some things that they see in Carson Beck. I doubt we see Carson Beck turn the ball over 4 times in a game here on out.
That would be surprising. And honestly, I think a lot of that came down to just the spiral, right? It's hard to be in Tuscaloosa and start to go down and then feel like you have to force it. And also, if their game plan was to push the ball down the field, and that's what you want to commit to in your first couple drives, they were trading, trying to force it with Alabama just coming down and scoring touchdowns and getting that crowd into it. So that's not necessarily a recipe for success, is, running an offense where you're having to push it down the field, chance some stuff, maybe throw a pick, and then, watch it turn around and Bama scores again. That's not the recipe for success for anybody. And so it just kind of seemed like Bama came into this game with a little bit of a better game plan. It seems like they were more prepared for what they thought Georgia was going to do versus Georgia knowing what Bama was going to do. That might be part of it just being DeBoer, and maybe DeBoer had a better idea of what Georgia was doing because they have an established program versus what was Kalen DeBoer able to do at Alabama. Maybe, Kirby Smart's having to guess a little bit at that. Don't know if that's what it is. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. You have to be ready. You have to get your guys ready to play. And so I kind of land on this kind of in the same place as you are. Both teams should feel really good about where they are going forward. For a little while there, I was ready to come on the podcast tonight and ask ourselves, are there more than 2 good teams in the SEC this year? Is it Bama and Texas, and that's just where we're going?
And Tennessee.
Oh, yeah, Tennessee too as well. Yeah,
they're just off this week, so we forget.
Yeah, they were just off this week. We didn't get to watch them, murder a team by 70 before the half or something like that. So, but I was ready to come in here and say, well, after what Georgia just did against Kentucky and watching Kentucky beat Ole Miss and watching this whole thing, is anybody actually good if Georgia's going to go in there against Bama and get smoked in their house? I was ready to come on there and talk about that, and I don't think that's the conversation we have to have anymore. Georgia can go, okay, well, we clearly weren't ready for whatever the buzzsaw of the first quarter was, so let's throw that first quarter out and say that if it weren't for the 21 points they scored in the first quarter, we won the rest of that game handily. Let's find a way to never let that happen ever again, and let's try to find a way to go through the rest of the season not getting in a 28-point hole at some point, because it's not a recipe for success, especially, like you said, with 2 big road games coming up, against Texas and Ole Miss.
I have a feeling we'll be seeing Georgia and Alabama face off again this year. Garrett, we can kind of end the discussion on this game on this. I'm sure we'll have some more thoughts on Monday's show. But did Alabama do enough to jump up to number 1 in the rankings in your mind with this win? At halftime, I was there. But I'm wondering how voters will. Maybe they submitted their ballot and went to bed
Yeah.
at halftime. But I'm wondering if they did enough to jump all the way up to number one by beating Georgia.
In my mind, the answer is yes. I thought that the winner of this game was going to be anyways. Now, the practicality of whether the AP actually puts them there is a different conversation. But going into this game, I thought that whoever won this game deserved to be number one based on what the AP has shown us so far this year. They were showing us that Texas jumped to number one because they smoked UTSA. That was the decision for them, was they smoked UTSA at the number one. And look, Texas has looked really, really good on the field, not exactly playing anybody. And so that's obviously not to their, downfall. I'm not trying to say that Texas hasn't looked good when they played these lower teams, but Alabama just looked really good against a team that all of us consider probably a top two, top three team in the country. And almost, I would argue that maybe the fact that Georgia came back helps your case, because Georgia showed that they were the team we thought they were, and Bama still found a way to beat them. And so I think that this just goes to show the point, like, this was a high-scoring game. This is a very back-and-forth contest. This is a very good Georgia team, and Alabama beat them. In my mind, they have to be number one right now because they have the best win in college football this season.
I think they'll be number two. I don't disagree with anything that you said, that was probably the best win in college football this year. But I think they'll be number two. I think they'll keep Texas number one.
They probably will. I just think that they should move them.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. Yeah. I'd have a hard time filling out my ballot if I was an AP poll voter.
It's not an easy decision.
If they won by 20 and or 25 or 28, like they were up at one point, then I think they'd be the almost unanimous number one team in the country on Monday morning. But we'll see what happens. The polls mean nothing right now. We're still over a month away from the first college football playoff rankings.
Gracious, how about that?